Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill.
Hello, hello, everyone. As you can see, this week we have a couple special guests.
Yes, which we are super excited about introducing to you very shortly. First, we would love to hear where are you watching us from? So please put in the comment where are you listening from? And we always like to talk about weather. I'm in Baltimore and it's been freezing cold for Baltimore standards and Tia standards, but Jill might have a different.
Right. I'm probably going to be like, I'll come vacation by you because it will
Right.
probably, to me, it will feel like Daria's background.
Right.
Um,
Nice, summery. I thought when the time changed here that we were gonna start having some warmer days. I was getting ready to kick into spring, and I don't think that's happening.
No, I was just sharing with Tia before we jumped on, and Maria and I are close geographically, but we are forecast to get another 6 to 12 inches of snow over the next few days.
Whew,
I'm like,
yeah.
I am so over snow. I guess that means maybe I should not think about not living in Minnesota, but I love it here. So I'll take the snow.
Because you probably have another month at least, month
Yeah,
and a
I don't know
half.
what the total's at. I mean, it's not bad compared to other places, but I think we're getting close to like 80 inches or something for
Whew,
this year.
that is wild. That's
Hmm.
wild. And
Hmm.
so, Maureen, you're probably having similar weather where you are. And Daria,
Yes.
how's the weather there?
well, I'm here in Suffolk, UK, so it's eastern part of the not far from London part, and it's been really cold, miserable, not
Oof.
much sun, but the flowers are already there. You can see, but it's just not as warm as we would expect to be.
Right, and not what the flowers are telling you, right? The flowers are like, please, it's time for summertime.
Yeah, well, they already open like all the blossoms, the daffodils, amazingly open, and
Oh,
I don't know what happened, but hopefully in a few weeks it will boost, and so
I
we all feel also nice and warm and a bit, a bit more excited.
yeah. Well, I do hope so.
We
Do
hope
hope.
so. Yes.
So
So
today
as you're,
we are celebrating International Women, and we know it was last week. That was like the day, but you guys know us. We like to continue to celebrate all the great things.
Mhm.
So this week we have some guests with us to talk about, international women and how we're impacting food safety in the future, right? And how we are part of that. So we would love to hear your input and your questions in the comments because we will be watching and bringing those up along the way.
Yeah. And, before we jump in too far, we know that there's some people who maybe aren't familiar with what we do and why we're here on a Wednesday live doing this.
Yes.
So here at Catalyst, we help food and beverage companies improve food safety outcomes and their food safety culture by empowering technical experts to become technical leaders.
Mhm.
We want technical leaders like food safety quality managers to have agency over what they're doing because we know bringing your whole being is what leads to your well-being, which leads to the outcomes we want at work.
Absolutely. And sometimes we forget, right? Being technical experts, we focus so much on those technical aspects because we're used to doing that. And it's not just us, right? Our organizations focus on those things, right? Like, do you have HACCP? Do you have PCQI? Have you done a shelf life study? All of these things that's very technical. But once we move into leadership roles, we forget that we are leading people,
Yes.
right? And we
Yeah.
miss out on those skills. So that's what we do. That's what we love to talk about.
And that's part of why we're so happy to have two women here celebrating International Women's Day in Food Safety. We would love to introduce you to Dr. Morrine Omolo and also Daria Liutcerina because they are impacting food safety globally, everywhere. We've worked in different areas, and we are so excited to have you with us today and share your insights and perspectives on leading food safety, but also some of the things that we notice being a woman and an international woman in this food safety scene.
Yes, yes.
So welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we'll
Thanks
start
for
with you,
inviting.
Daria. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You talked a little bit about where you are, but a little bit about your background and how you found your way in food.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, first of all, and it's so great to be here. And I've been watching a few episodes at the back, and here I am. So it's amazing, and thanks so much. Well, for me, I think it's being a chemist as a background, and then I worked for the big manufacturer, food ingredients for the big corporate business, and I built my career starting from being working at the lab specialist up to the quality assurance supervisor for the big 1,000 plus employees facility, and it was quite a big quality department. And then I moved to the food safety, quality, and regulatory function, more like a support function within expertise. And I also moved countries by that move, and I also got married and had my daughter. And after overall 15 years working for this big company, that the chance came, and I thought I will take it, and I thought I will do something different. And since summer 2022, I've been self-employed, and I started to grow my consultancy business. And well, I must say I faced a lot of challenges, which I absolutely love this journey. And um, I would say that's what you just mentioned, Tia, from being just a technical quality roles within a corporate environment, although I was exposed to different multinational, multicultural, experiences and projects and things like that, then I suddenly needed to step up for myself to developing in me, I would say, and then grow more skills like a sales, marketing, and delivering the services, well, building the services and then delivering them.
Yeah.
And I would say what has helped me is my strong value is the building trusted relationship, where I see absolutely benefit and number one in my area of working. So I'm a food safety consultant right now, and I absolutely love what my job is bringing to me, and I'm learning everything from the scratch, basically.
Yeah.
But this value really has helped me to grow, and having the opportunity to say thank you for everybody and you guys as well, to support me on this journey, and all of the, I would say, partners. And I partner with a few people, and I would like to thank them especially, to brought me up to that stage where I'm confidently now delivering the services. And so my consultancy I called the Daria L, and I started to consult on BRC, SALSA requirements, FSSC 22000, and do the audits and training, coaching, and mentoring. So it's kind of a mixture of things I'm doing right now, and in many areas, food manufacturer, retail, and food safety, food hospitality business, food service, I mean. And they've been just amazing journey, and I love to share my story where I hear people asking me, how did you get there? And to be fair, I was puzzled at first, and then I'm just started to move, so started to talk with people, and it's just naturally got to me at that point where I'm happy just to to explore what the future brings. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love how you started at a large manufacturing. You were able to take those skills, right? And now you're giving it to many different businesses.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I love helping people, and I being in the shoes of the technical role, where the firefighting is always taking
Mhm.
place.
Oh yeah.
You hear the absolutely. You want life balance, and to be able to do that, you need to sometimes step out and look at the bigger picture and have that perspective. Maybe if someone else coming and telling you, oh, maybe you do it something different, even just asking you questions, it might help so much.
Mhm.
That's why I love what I'm doing.
I love that. I
Um,
love that.
yes, and that's such an important part. We always talk about, like, if you want to, when we talk about culture, if you want to change culture, you have to change the conversation. So I love that you bring up when you want to know something, like, how do you ask different questions?
Yeah.
There's so much more to dive into with that. But before we go too far, I'd love to hear, Morrine, your story. Like, how did you find food safety? Do you mind sharing a little bit of your background and letting our audience know who you are?
Of course. My food safety journey is a little bit more winded and different from Daria, and I'm glad that it's different enough that we'll have a broader scope of the different journeys that bring us all to the same table. I'm originally born and raised in Kenya, so I came to the US for undergraduate studies. I started out biochemistry major with a specific interest of going to medical school. So if you look at my resume up until I finished undergrad, it was all medical experience, watching neurosurgeons perform spinal fusions and remove tumors. And I worked quite a bit with cancer, terminally ill cancer patients. And it was in that experience that I got to know myself in two different ways. First, I realized that in the United States, I would not be able to find myself through medical school with the information that I had at that time. But I also realized that my passion for public health was not designed to be in a clinical setting because my spirit could not take that amount of suffering on a day-to-day basis and for me to remain mentally healthy. So I had to pivot with guidance from a lot of trusted mentors to pivot away from a clinical setting to essentially a year of not knowing what to do with myself. So I took a position and worked in a laboratory setting with engineers building soft drink dispensers. And it was quite a different environment when you pivot from working with biological scientists to working with engineers. They have a very different way of thinking. But in that project, I started to then ask myself, what other areas of public health um, might I want to go into that would take advantage of my history and my background, my training, without taking me too far out from what my dream of being a doctor was, right? So a lot of experimenting, a lot of reading, a lot of mentoring. I have so many people to thank for being here today. And I slowly started to narrow it down to a couple of fields. I went into public health. I thought about biomedical engineering. And then it's really amazing how things come together sometimes. My then boyfriend asked me a very simple question. He said, "Well, what are you good at? What does your history tell you about where your skills are, but more importantly, to bring together your skills and your natural tendencies? What do you do well? What makes you happy? What can you do if money was not an object?" And so I started to look back and look at my upbringing and what was natural in my environment. And this light bulb moment went off when I was looking at different graduate programs in different schools, and I stumbled upon food safety and food science at that time. It literally was staring you in the face. And reading through the program, what it offered, what the career prospects were, it was a moment of eureka for me.
Yeah.
So it was really about what school.
Hmm.
And I looked at different schools. I applied to graduate school and got into two universities in the US and Canada. Picked to stay in the US because I was already an international student. I didn't want to start over. And really moving into food safety was a combination of day to day experience and watching those that have gone before me. So My professor in food safety and quality, she came to us from industry with 10 years of experience, and she had the most amazing pictures and case studies of how food safety practice can go wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she had very tangible stories that just kept opening my mind to the different ways that food scientists are valuable in a day-to-day setting. And up to then, everyone that I was speaking to outside of the field, they were not quite sure what food scientists do. It was really what I was hearing was about what chefs would typically do, what dietitians would do, what nutritionists do, but nobody quite could explain to non-practitioners what a food scientist does. And I thought that was really fascinating, given that we basically feed the world, right?
Right.
Um, so I took advantage of internship experiences, mentorship, joining organizations like IFP and IFT. And over the graduate training period, I learned of there's a foundation called the Schlumberger Foundation based in France, and they sponsor women from developing countries to study PhD in Europe and in the United States. I was already here. Um, I took a leap of faith and I applied, and I got the grant to do my PhD. It was fully funded, $50,000 a year for 5 years.
Wow.
It was the most amazing thing and the most scary thing I've ever done in my life.
That's awesome.
Because then it became strange to me that I was becoming a doctor, just not the type I thought I would be,
Yeah.
right? And every step of the way during my PhD process was peeling of onions and tears in the process of learning about what it meant to be a scientist, what it meant to have a scientific inquiry. And I kept struggling. My first project was building computer models to understand the E. coli genome. And I struggled quite a bit to tie that in with my passion for people and community. I understood that I was creating new knowledge and connecting the present to the future scientifically. But I kept seeing so much suffering and need for somebody to address the issues that were plaguing our local community today.
Yeah.
And coming from Africa, I kept hearing about diarrheal diseases and hunger and malnutrition. And I kept thinking, my genome scale model will further science, but it will not address these problems in real time. So the second half of my PhD was looking at food safety education. And how do we educate our food handlers? How do we educate consumers? How have we historically done that? And why, despite all the millions of dollars and initiatives put into this initiative, are we still having foodborne outbreaks, even in a country like the United States? Something
Yeah.
is not working in
Yeah.
our approach. And it was in that confusion and inquiry that I stumbled upon Food Safety Culture is a book by Frank Yarnis, and that book changed my life. I don't know if you'll ever get to know that, but he did change the trajectory of my career completely.
Wow.
And I thought, social scientists study behavior for a living. They have models, we know this, that we can
Yeah.
change behavior if we have the right tools. But what I was seeing in the food industry is we meet people when they're already adults and they have established ways of doing things. And we are hitting a wall because we are trying to change that through a 1 hour training and
Yeah.
expecting that they'll suddenly feel different about foodborne illness.
Yeah.
And my mom and my dad, they raised us in a research environment. I grew up in the University of Minnesota St. Paul campus, scientists all over the place and animal agriculture going on. So I was very comfortable in the area of food production.
Mhm.
What I felt was missing is how my mom taught me about food safety.
Mm.
That's what I see missing. I don't eat carrots and I don't wash my hands because the CDC told me to do so and the USDA has a food pyramid. I do those things because my mom taught me to do them.
Yeah.
Right? So I keep thinking as a scientist that if we can step back and borrow from social scientists about how people learn behavior, how they develop what becomes their adult food safety culture, then perhaps we'll have a different way of educating, not just scaring people into compliance or punishing them when they don't comply,
Yeah.
but really seeing how do they gain what they understand as safe food.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to what I do today, which is basically working in local food systems. I have had exposure to corporate, but in a very minimal internship setting. Majority of my experience is in local foods, trying to work on one-on-one with food producers, understanding why are they producing food in a local setting when Walmart can feed the world. So
Yes.
those nuances of what consumers want, the trends we are seeing in the local food movement, I feel scientists need to engage and do research in this area. And so I decided I'll be one of those that pioneer this experience. So
Yeah.
that pretty much covers my convoluted journey from wanting to be a neurosurgeon to working in local food systems.
That's so awesome.
And thank
That path to
you.
food safety is always just so different for
It is.
everyone.
It is, and it's interesting because even with both of you talking about where your career started, it wasn't like, gosh, I'm going to go do food safety. It
Right.
wasn't even on the radar. So I love how most people's paths seem to start like in an area like that's like a tangent to food safety and food science,
Yeah.
and somehow we kind of find our way in. So
Yeah. And it's driven by our passion, right? Like people in food safety, we are passionate about what we do. And this whole aspect of culture, right? And human behavior and changing that human behavior, Morrine, I feel like you are talking exactly what we talk about every day at Catalyst because, we're looking at it from an organization standpoint and those people that you're talking about that did not think about food safety really at home. And now they're manufacturing food safety. And now we have to figure out how to change those behaviors in, the manufacturing setting or the retail setting. But even if you think about it from an organization standpoint, some organizations have been running for 150 years, right? And we're trying to change food safety culture by using the same tools that we've been using over the years. And we know that's not going to get us there. And like you said, a 1 hour training or annual training, that's not going to get us there. It's complementary, right? We should continue to do our trainings. We should continue to use the tools that we've learned along the way. But if we're going to change human behavior, we really have to look at something different and do something different. So I love, I'm a little biased because that's what we work in and that's what I love to do. That's what I'm passionate about. But I love it that you brought that up because it's true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I think one of the things, like you said, Tia, is that we're really passionate about. What I love is all four of us are extremely passionate about what we do, and I know there's many other people out there as well that are in that boat. But with that passion means that we also run into a lot of challenges because we're constantly seeing like where we can have things improve and where we can help and like
Yeah.
the small things that can happen. And I think even as we all know, like even as women, some of those challenges even look different.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you ventured into food safety, like what has been the most challenging or surprising, working in food safety, especially in this international role as a woman?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I definitely can relate of facing some challenges through my career and working with a international corporate setting when you sometimes meet US, Europe country and some Asian guys, and just really simple as that. The time difference always
Hell yeah.
challenges all of that, but it's relates not only for women, it's for everybody. And I could just probably say that the general challenge, I would say, no matter what country you are, no matter where you are, based on my experience, the one of the challenges is the strong situational leadership, uh, acceptance what you have, like a decision making, and then the follow up. And through the different stakeholders, no matter what projects I was in. That was one of the big part, like who is going to kind of step up and do things, to move things forward, no matter what culture you are. Maybe in also delivery expectations are a little bit different, and sometimes from US I felt a bit more pushy, you need to deliver it yesterday, things like that. And from Asian, I don't know if it's correct. It's like say
Yeah,
to
we feel that.
yeah, you felt that. So that's it. I mean, but you need to understand and then listen to each other. I think the best kind of takeaway from me during my career experiences, start listening to each other and really listening actively, where they actually coming from, what
Yeah.
are their backgrounds, what are the maybe different points of view, and what do they expect, and then try to kind of collaborate on that, to try to find the common ground to go through. And of course it might be disagreements, which is amazing, because then you can both sides learn, and there are so many opportunities again to share different experiences and
Yeah.
different perspectives. And so the that being listening, and then obviously uh, building through that understanding, emphatic relationship is the key then to move forward. But even if you having a stakeholder manager and a project manager, for example, through the different stakeholders, or going to the customer facing projects, then intuitively, with women, I think intuition is quite strong naturally, and where you feel like, and then you kind of feel what's next, and therefore is advantage to develop that skill as much as that, then you can basically offer what maybe client or stakeholder want next, but they didn't think about that. So it's kind of a little bit, be a bit more proactive and seeing what can be improved beyond that, only that setting, I would say, because like always looking a little bit broader. And then I think that can benefit working internationally. That's why I love that, international exchange on the point of views, because everybody can benefit from it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really great point. Like looking outside of where you are now and thinking about, okay, broader, right? And the point that you even talk about on like different cultures coming together and having conversations and making decisions, right? I think like that's a huge like to me, my ears like really perked up, because that's really what food safety culture is about, right? And really being able to have conversations with people with different backgrounds and different perspectives, right? Different cultures really is what we're talking about. If you learn how to have those conversations, right, and learn how to learn about other people, like exactly what you said, Daria, then that's a part of changing your food safety culture. That's a part of even living in your food safety culture, that people feel like regardless of their background or their own personal culture, they're able to bring something to the table and it's going to be listened to.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, that's so powerful because, right, if we view everything through our lens, we miss so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so being able to ask someone to share their lens with us is just really so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just one point from the beginning of the career, and then for all young women professional, and based on my experience as well, coming from the university, and study hard studying, and normally you go and crack that knowledge, and then going to the working in the different perspectives. And I still felt when I was starting working, like, quite biased views sometimes on the young women. When we are trying to, you know, talk about very complicated topics, like with chemistry, for example, is my background, and it took me, I would say, some time to build that respect within organization,
Mm,
to build my confidence first of all,
Mm.
yeah.
because I was seen as, young and maybe not as familiar, but also not as confident. So I
Mm,
think this is the key, is to build that strong belief in yourself, and then you can speak up and share your opinions, because it's absolutely beneficial to include everybody's opinions, and
yeah.
so we grow the leadership teams, of course. So we with filling the women and having the diversity and inclusivity, um, really benefits. The studies showing is absolutely beneficial, but also sparks others
Mm,
and support others within your organization.
yeah. Yeah. Maureen, I'm curious about you
Mhm.
and your challenges that you've seen.
Well, I'd like to echo Daria's point first and then perhaps add something. Moving along the line of cross cultural perspectives, one of the challenges that I faced and a lot of international colleagues of mine face is difference in leadership and cultural hierarchies. So, while some societies will infringe on women's rights, that's not the direction I'm going with this. I'm going in the direction of just the natural order of how things work in different cultures.
Mm,
um, Women tend to take the humble position, the position of men as the leaders and women as supporting cast in that play. And so
yeah.
when I think of myself as an African woman and looking at the background of Africa and the way things were during my mom bringing me up in her growing process,
Yeah.
we are trained to be humble, to not raise your voice, to not be overly dramatic, right? So when you start raising your voice and you're dramatic and you're being animated, regardless of what you're saying, it's lost in translation of your physicality and how you are appearing in this space.
Yeah.
So coming to the United States and seeing how women can speak their mind and walk into boardrooms and put their foot on the floor and express how they feel. Yes, with some limitations, but still the freedoms are there for women to have a voice. It took me a very long time to learn to advocate for myself and advocate for others, not necessarily women, but other people in general, to call out an injustice when I see one. And so over time, it really has been a dance for me, figuring out at what point am I being conservative because of the way that I was raised versus I am not confident. Those two things have been very difficult for me to weigh out. Am I holding back because I don't feel confident in what I'm about to say, or because I feel that if I do, I will come across as overly dramatic and raising my voice? Men are in the room and they're having ideas, and why are you raising your voice? You're only, a young woman just right out of school. What do you have to offer? So there are those voices that are really based on culture and how we were raised and trying to navigate the space in which we work. And the funny thing is, the longer I stayed in the US, the more distance was created with the cultural aspects of my upbringing and how to behave, so to speak, when I go back home. And so, a very good example is in 2017, I was invited into a USDA grant, which included going back to Kenya and teaching food safety to local women, 200 women in an agricultural production space. And I was there to be the food safety educator. And I had a moment of panic because I had to then weigh in, am I going in as a food safety specialist? How am I going to show up in this space? Because you show up in that lab coat and the wall comes up and the ears go deaf and no one's listening to anything you're saying, because I will be viewed as you from America coming to tell us what we should be doing about food.
Yeah.
So it had to be this back and forth of retaining my professional prowess, but at the same time, recloaking myself with what an African woman is in my community setting.
Yeah.
And beyond that, realizing that a lot of the women that I was talking to are old enough to be my mom. So I had to show up as their daughter, not a PhD professor, right?
Yeah.
And so it has been this balance between the only way to reach people is to find out what aspects of who you are and who they are mesh together so that communication goes through. If it means that I have to wear jeans and sneakers and a hat to go out to the farm, that's what I'll do. I can't wear my lab coat as a microbiologist everywhere. But
Yeah.
if I'm going to a conference, then I better bring my A game because I'll be meeting my colleagues and they'll be speaking microbiology. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So, what I would like to add now, because I was just building on Daria's point, is the biggest challenge that I see, given that I grew up in the global south, is the back and forth and almost parallel lines between food safety and food security. I keep hearing the question of, and I hear it quite a bit, comments about food safety is a luxury for those who have food. And
Ooh.
the
Yeah.
thinking behind that is when people are hungry, they'll eat whatever is in front of them.
Yeah.
And who cares what I have to say about microbiology if I'm not solving a hunger problem?
Yeah.
And so pushing for the narrative that food safety is a big component of food security is a narrative that's only starting to percolate into people's minds and into conversations. It was not part of it in the beginning. And so I feel like we lost traction with that along the way. And yes, the SDGs are there and they're moving all of us in the positive direction. But when we talk about food sovereignty and food deserts, and we're talking about environments where people don't have clean water to drink, and we're talking about
Right.
wash your fruits and vegetables in running tap water, there are a lot of assumptions in that statement. There are places in the world where there is no tap water. The only water is surface water from the rain when it rains,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how do I teach a mother to make food for her 1 year old baby in a way that takes advantage of the resources that she or he does have access to minimize food safety issues? That to me seems to be the biggest challenge because the narrative of food safety has been very Western in the way that it's been presented and researched into. And so the global South is still missing in this narrative, taking into account the real on the ground experiences of individuals in places where having the concepts of food safety as we present them is a luxury. They really cannot afford it, not because they
Right.
don't want to, but because the environment just does not support it.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge I see. The other obvious challenge as women who choose to have families is balancing. Career in food safety is a career in service. It's putting consumers first. It's fighting for what we believe to be right, regardless of what the corporate environment is saying. And sometimes that is an uphill battle. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to do that when you're raising a young family. For example, in my case, where babies go to daycare and they get sick, and then you have to stay home with them. So if you're a QA manager and you have a recall situation where it's all hands on deck and you have a sick baby, what do you do about that? Right?
Yeah.
So those are the things that happen day to day in the background that most of us don't talk about, but they drain our energy and they change the narrative. And the more we can be honest among ourselves as women, and then hopefully our partners in these journeys can appreciate how difficult it is to choose a career that's about saving lives
Yeah.
and keeping our lives afloat while we are doing that, so that you're not in a situation where you have to choose between caring for your sick baby and a recall situation, right? And those things
Yeah.
happen in real time.
It does. And we're feeling that because, you know, Jill and myself, both of our kids are sick right now, and we're struggling because we're picking up their germs. So we understand exactly what you're talking about, like right now in our lives. And we just have been lucky that, well, we work in an environment where we don't typically have those emergencies, right? Come to us, but there's many people that do. They're directly responsible for those emergencies, and those emergencies can happen at any time.
Mhm. Well, even though there are, probably culturally some differences in primary caregivers, I think in general, primary caregiving still falls to mothers. And I think when we think about being in food safety, with it being an always on demand type
Yeah.
life, I think as women, it can keep us from moving into roles that offer huge demands in that area, or we go into those roles to find later that, like me, I feel like I sold out. Like I did a lot for the companies I worked for, only to find that I was just a number to them.
Yeah.
And so all those extra times of missing kids' events or shipping my kids off to school, even though I know they weren't feeling well,
Yeah.
I did thinking that there was this trust and response. And so I think as women, that is a really big struggle that we have because these roles are created and they're designed with these huge expectations that we give everything.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
the really good questions are like, where do we meet and how do we make sure our needs are met as women in these areas as well? And how can our companies better support us
Yeah.
in those areas? Because we know that some roles are intentionally designed to be huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And does that help us all bring our best to work every day?
Right.
And even for backups, I think as you talk about, even with food safety and recalls, like a strong team is one that can operate with anybody gone and should be
Exactly.
able to do that. Because if it hinges on one person gone because I have to choose between, relating to a family event or doing something else, whether it's a sick child or whether it's, some event with them. I think there's some trade-offs that are really hard for us to have to make. And I think we can do a better job as a food industry creating roles that are much more inclusive for
Yeah.
us to be part of them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Sorry, that was my little tangent.
I love it because it really does. When we talk about food safety culture, this is a part of it, right? Like this is a part of when you talk about Jill, like if one person's missing, if the whole program is going to fall down, or you're not going to be able to execute that program because someone has to travel or someone has to stay at home with a sick child, or maybe they're sick, right?
Right.
If it crumbles at that point, right, you really have not built your programs and your culture to withstand change, right? It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that old belief of being on call 24/7, 365. What I love, and I'm going to use the generation, generationally, but I think some of the new generation coming through are like, no, thank you.
Right.
I
Yeah.
see what that's done to our parents or others, and like that's not the life I want. So I think we're going to either proactively move into a space where we redesign roles that are more supportive, or we'll be forced into those.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if it's proactive. It's probably more reactive.
It is at this point.
Right.
It's still
We're having
reactive.
attention issues. We're having, issues with people, quitting the job. Like, and it's because of those things. Like to be on 24/7, 365 days. It's like, the younger generation is really starting to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not important.
Yeah. But women bring such an important perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so I think even today you've both shared like these different perspectives that we bring to the workplace that impact food safety. And Morrine, I love that you talked about like how we do food safety is a lot of what we learned when we were kids.
Yeah.
So if we don't bring that perspective, how does that impact, either how we view risk within our own products or from suppliers? Where does it all go?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to, Morrine, that you talked about just like world hunger and how food safety plays a piece of it. And Claire, thank you for adding your perspective as well. It seems like that you are involved in a nonprofit where you focus on this. And we know that, from a UN standpoint, one of their focus area is hunger, food hunger, right? And when you look at the World Health Organization, a piece of their talk is around food safety, and how that supports food hunger. And I don't know a lot around it, right? I haven't done a ton of research. It's just the things that I've seen. And maybe Maureen, you have some insight on this because of your passion there in your work. But I'm hoping that those things are starting to connect, where it's around. I love even like the whole thought around food safety is a luxury for the people that have food, right? And we see it where it's like, oh, if you're looking at this lens of food safety, you're like, wow, would anyone ever eat that food? But when that's the only food that you have with no running water, right? The perspective is a little different. And so I hope that really just like as a globe of resources that we're taking those things into account even more. I don't know, Maureen, if that's something that you've seen as you've kind of worked in your area.
Yes and no. I'd like to share the positive side because we already have agreed that there's some work that needs to be done there. I had a very interesting conversation with Ambassador Cousin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who she is. She's the former director for the World Food Program.
Ah, okay.
It just very interesting sequence of events led to us having a very nice conversation. And I asked her the same question, what she's been doing in the World Food Program and what she's seeing on the ground as she moves across the world. And she did iterate that, yes, the narrative is slowly changing towards the concept that people cannot be food secure unless food safety is part of that narrative. And the reasoning behind that is so in the Western world, we have E. coli and Salmonella, Listeria. Those are the typical players that we hear about.
Right.
In the developing world, really you hear about cholera and dysentery and typhoid. So these are really water and hygiene related issues that come with lack of water or lack of proper just personal hygiene understanding.
Right. Yeah.
So it really is a delicate balance between moving to secure people's food future, which is critical because we all have to eat and we have to eat at the right time, the right amount of food, the right combination of nutrients for us to be healthy human beings.
Right. Yeah.
But understanding how food safety plays a role in all of that requires more than just understanding microbiology. It's helping people understand that if you eat food that's not safe and you end up with diarrheal diseases, that episode of foodborne illness actually does worse in your body because it's draining the food that you already have in your system. It's draining your electrolytes. It's taking water that you don't have clean water to drink. It's creating havoc in terms of your immune system. It's creating mental health issues connecting food and disease, which none of us want. We don't want a mental health connection between eating and getting sick. That's just traumatizing.
Right.
And if you think about a lot of the diarrheal diseases happen in children below the age of 5 and our elderly population, those are the most vulnerable people. And of course, people with compromised immune systems for whatever reason. But if you just even focus on children, they're just beginning to understand what food is and the role that food plays in healthy living. If every time they eat, they become ill, you have an entire generation of kids who are terrified about food.
Yeah.
And they start to make negative associations between what they're eating and getting ill. And so that's a problem that then we have to address later on in life. And we have people with all kinds of eating disorders, which we try to address by assuming that it's a bad habit they developed in college or in high school, but we don't know what was happening in their early childhood in relation to food. Perhaps they had a terrible foodborne illness. And then the other thing that is less talked about is the long-term impacts of foodborne illness. So most people are healthy, and so they'll get an icky feeling after eating at some restaurant, and they'll then say, "I'll never go back there again," and that's the end of that story.
Yeah.
But we know now through the backfight movement that a lot of families are forever changed by long-term impacts of foodborne illness, long-term, illnesses that just keep on giving, needing kidney dialysis, needing mental health counseling, needing
Yeah. Yeah.
so much extensive and expensive ongoing um, just healthcare because of foodborne illness. Those are narratives that have for a very long time been hidden. And think about it: if it is not known to us in the US and in Europe, how much more of it is hiding in the developing world where research is not happening in this area yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to, in the minds of people, in the minds of consumers, connect the relationship between food security and food safety. They are not different things. To me, food that is not safe is just an edible substance. It really does not qualify as food. It has to be safe for it to be food.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think both you and Daria has brought up, a mother's role in food safety. And when we talk about how we learned how to handle food from our mothers, right? I'm curious on how you look at a woman's role directly in food safety, whether it is with our families or in a professional setting at work. Daria, please start if you can hear
Yeah,
us.
so yeah, that's a good one. I was listening to Marine, and thanks so much for sharing. And to be fair, it's just like a different perspective, but you also not realizing that there are other parts of the world where the food safety is improving, and then the new standards are coming, and but in some areas there's just such a big gap of moving just on the essential things, and that's I hope that will improve soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
And as for the like women role within I would say impacting food safety culture, I see also that that's what you mentioned, Tia, about professional and then personal life. I think in the professional life, then as we talked earlier about how important it is to understand cultural difference, and I would say for women to be up to date. Um, it's hard, of course, jungling things, and we'll mention later on about the life balance, but that is one of the things which just stay curious about what's happening, because it was one of the times in my life that I just like miss out the 1 year, and then it's basically, yeah, you just like kind of out of the world, and then what happened, like you need to a bit of go in and get that knowledge, and that the
Yeah.
networking might help in that case. And in terms of international impact, I also faced um, the language differences.
Yeah.
And when I moved to UK, I didn't speak as I'd say I'm not fluent English, but I didn't speak, and I didn't feel confident enough also to advocate for the food safety before I had that confidence in me to talk,
Yeah.
and therefore the different stakeholders as well to impact for the different. Aspect in I worked with, it's important, for example, for French people to talk in French. Well, I don't speak French, so therefore I had to find someone talking in French. Then I would have to spend some time of taking someone on board, and then impact in that way. So that's a bit of the challenge here, and
Yeah.
also across the globe, so many different requirements, regulations, and it's all changing, all updating. And that's what I was telling you earlier about what's happening. And if you take like example allergens, and I remember working on a project, and once we look through the regulatory requirements and build up, I think it's one of the great resources, Nebraska University for the allergens. Then you can see that template where the all differences are, and then where we have
Wow.
to consider that. And then there are so many different requirements, labeling contaminants and etc etc. And then on the multinational and corporate business, it's very important to actually go and check all of that, and it can take a lot of resource. um, Overall, I would say from the professional perspective, the all this understanding these all cultural differences, and but being present in the decision making roles, women can really make impact, because it's tend to be women tend to be more detailed, a little bit, maybe picky sometimes, go and go and find out, and then make it, impact or take into
Mm.
consideration.
Yeah.
And the other aspect is personal. I'll try to be quick. That's obviously being a mom. It's I've been passionate about lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, and healthy eating, nutrition, and of course, food safety is because that's what I do. And when I started to look at the kids, and obviously I worked in a micro lab, and then it's a little bit here shifting in the mindset like what's healthy, and but to advocate and teach kids what actually to be, how to be healthy, how to eat healthy, what is it food safety when they start cooking with you. For example, why can't you just touch raw meat and lick it? Or eggs, yeah, things like that. And
Right.
then obviously when women get together, they are more powerful, and they can go and get volunteering, have some more events at school and the local community, be present there to have their voices, because everybody face the same problems
Yeah.
with kids,
Yeah.
being juggling the work, and being having a kids, and it's always like chaotic.
Right.
And
Yeah.
try to not lost don't be lost in that, and also take care of ourselves. That's
Yeah.
absolutely important.
Yeah. I love that. Maureen, do you have anything to add?
I appreciate Daria making such a nice summary of the challenges that we face in our role in food safety. Um, I would like to share something that's unique and specific to my experience in the developing world. That, to Daria's point, there is power in numbers, and in my cultural experiences in Kenya, I saw the value of women coming together to achieve something that they would otherwise not be able to do alone. So
Mhm.
it's more than mentorship, which is amazing. It's more than just supporting one another, which is absolutely invaluable. It's about moving the needle in ways that individual women or two or three women cannot do alone. So, for example, buying land. If a woman wanted to buy a piece of land to grow fruits and vegetables, they might not be able to buy land if the cultural setting is that women cannot own land or inherit land from their families.
Yeah.
But if women came together and had their organizations can purchase land for business. And so if women were able to come together and um, move towards eliminating or minimizing food deserts or challenges of acquiring food as individual families, but rather do it as communities of women,
Yeah.
that's one way to achieve that goal. The other thing I think about very quickly is education. So food safety is education, and it is ongoing lifelong education. As science changes, as the rules change, as the um, hazards we encounter every day change, we educate our children in our societies in so many different ways. And so making food safety a priority, like Daria said, in our interactions, not just with our children, but human beings in general. When you see something that does not make sense or is a food safety risk, having the confidence to gently point it out.
Yeah.
And this works well for me because I grew up in an environment where it literally takes a village. And so as I was sharing with you guys yesterday, women my mom's age who I grew up around had the permission to spank me if I was misbehaving, and then hold my hand and bring me home and tell my mom why they spanked me. So teaching children beyond just your own, and young adults about risky behavior when it comes to food safety, simple things like washing your hands properly, making food safety a way of life rather than a profession that you practice when you go to the office or when you go to the processing plant, making it the way that we do business, the way that we interact with each other at church, at picnics, at because we are always eating, right? We are eating people, and we eat where the food is at. So having food safety be that part of that narrative is really, really important to me. And then finally, I'd say that education as it pertains to creating the next generation of food safety practitioners. A
Mm.
lot of people still don't understand what food science is and what food safety as a career path is. So, what can we do as women who are already succeeding in this environment to create the next generation of us through mentorship, through exposures, through events like this where we can speak freely about success, but also the difficult path to being a food safety practitioner? To
Yeah.
me, seems reasonable and achievable if we're willing to be cautiously vulnerable to the next generation so that we don't terrify them, but we also help them understand the reality of being in food safety as a mom or
Yeah.
as a woman in general.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, we have loved having both of you on Real Talk Food Safety this week. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us. I
you.
know our audience is like soaking up everything that you all are saying and talking about that is happening really globally, right? And how it impacts each other. So, we talked a lot about what's happening across the globe, right? And a lot of this ties back into food safety culture and leadership. And I love, Daria, you brought up situational leadership, right? Like where you need to think about what situation you're in and how to mold that leadership to it. Morrine, you even talked a little bit about that, even when you think about like your culture, right? If you're going back to Africa and you're having a conversation with a group of women that is like your mom, right? Like you have to show up like their daughter. And so we talk a lot about leadership and how to lean into those different situations. And right now with Catalyst, we actually have a module 1 preview for a boot camp. And so we want to share that with our audience. We'll make sure that we add the link to this particular talk so that you will have it, because we want people to see this is what we do, and it's a part of how you lead, and that's just what we do every day. So we love to share that with our network. All right, well, we will be back next week. Every Wednesday, Real
Yes.
Talk Food Safety at noon Eastern Time, 11 Central. Daria, I'm not sure what time it is there.
4 p.m.
4 p.m.
UK.
in the UK. So please join us. We're super excited about next week.
Yes, we are. Thanks so much for being here.
All right, we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.